Hi, everybody. I know I am a couple of minutes late from when I said I was going to do this live, but I had some technical difficulties. I think my iPad is rebelling against me because I keep refusing to update it because it seems like every time it asks me to update, it's like right when I need to use it, and the updates take forever. So, um, Facebook on my iPad wasn't giving me the option to actually go live. So I had to improvise. If you guys have watched me before and heard me talk about all the gear that I have this awesome tripod that I love that actually has an iPad attachment to it. And that's how I do all my live videos. And my phone doesn't really attach to it. So I was trying to figure out how to go live from my phone without having to hold the phone, because then I feel like it just like wiggles and bounces around the whole time. So like pro move here, I have got a giant binder clip that is holding my phone to the iPad stand currently. So, whatever, we make it work. So today I want to talk about how to land podcast interviews, because it's something that we do for all of our clients. It's a great way to establish yourself as an expert, to get in front of new audiences, and to generate leads. I had this awesome conversation earlier this week with another publicist, Esther Kiss, who's phenomenal. And she and I were talking about some of the misconceptions and just interesting things people come to us with when they start working with us. And we were talking about how many people want to go on television, and that they sometimes have unrealistic expectations of what being on television is going to do for them. It's an excellent credibility builder. It looks awesome to be able to share it on social media and to be able to put it on your website. I'm all for my clients doing TV, but if you want to generate actual leads for your business, television generally isn't the best way to do it. And what I have found in my experience is that podcast interviews, particularly if you're doing podcast interviews on podcasts that are in your niche, is the best way to generate leads. And there's some tricks to leverage it and to get the most out of it. And I'll have to save that for a future live, because this one we're just going to talk about how to get you on there in the first place. But Esther agreed with me. She said the same thing, that she finds as well that her clients get their best leads from podcasts. It's not from guest blogs or mentions in a newspaper or television appearances. It's podcasts. So it was interesting to talk to another publicist and hear that they've had that same experience with their clients. And it convinces me that podcast interviews are some of the most meaningful things you can do for your business from a publicity standpoint, especially if you're going on podcasts that really do fit your niche and that allow you to showcase those things that make your services and products unique and fabulous. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about how to pitch for those. I want to focus on how do you choose a topic and how do you present that, because I have been fielding pitches for one of my clients for her podcast and going through where people pitch her and say, hey, I want to come be on your podcast. And it's been interesting to see how other people do it, both publicists and people who are pitching themselves. You can absolutely pitch yourself. And that's where the goal of this live is, to teach you how to pitch yourself. But reading through how people pitch themselves, I see some common mistakes. And most of it is around how you present your topic, what you want to come on and talk about. And that can make or break your pitch. That can keep us from continuing to read it. It can keep us from booking you. So I want to give some advice on that. We've been pretty successful booking our clients. In fact, one of my clients, Amanda Goldman Petrie, we booked her for 50 podcast interviews in the first 60 days that we worked with her. So she was all over the place doing podcast interviews. She was everywhere, and it wasn't all the same topic. We created different topics for different kinds of podcasts, supporting the different programs and services that she was offering at the time. And we pitch podcasts for all of our clients because they are such a great way to kind of kill two birds with one stone, establish yourself as an expert and also generate those leads. So when you're thinking about the type of podcast that you want to go on, you want to focus on podcasts your ideal client listens to. You may already know what those are. You may need to throw out maybe in your Facebook group or in other Facebook groups and ask people, know what podcasts they listen to on a regular basis. That's a really great way to find out which podcast actually makes sense for you to go after. And then beyond that, what we do for our clients, because our clients are in all sorts of different industries and niches, is let's say we've got a new client who focuses on fitness for moms. And actually, we do have a client who focuses on that. So I don't listen to any podcast that would focus on that because I'm not a mom. I also hate working out, and so fitness podcasts aren't really my thing. And so we had to go out and find the right podcast. They gave us some ideas, and then we went out and looked, and we Googled things like, best fitness podcast for women, best fitness podcast for moms, terms like that. And you'll find a lot of times that you'll see people who've created these lists, like top 10 fitness podcasts for women, stuff like that. And it takes a lot of legwork. I mean, that, is one of the benefits to hiring a publicist like us, is that we're doing that legwork for you. And if it's a niche we've already been in, we've already got the information. We keep this enormous master list of all the podcasts that we've pitched ourselves for and pitched clients for. And we've got a tab for like every different niche. And eventually I'll feel like we have everything covered. We're getting pretty close. So we're able to go to that, and we keep track of the podcast, what type of guests they're looking for, their contact information. So once we've got that, when we have another client who comes in who sort of fits in that same area, it's really fast to go through and pitch those. But if you're doing it for yourself, know that there's going to be some legwork involved for you to find those podcasts to be on. The other things that we check for when we're looking for podcasts for our clients, we check to see, is the podcast still active? So is it still on? People start podcasts and stop them all the time. They start them, they realize how much work they are, and they stop. So you want to make sure they're still putting up new episodes. And I want to see that they're consistently putting up episodes. So whether their schedule is once a week or twice a week or once a month or whatever it is, I want to see that consistency, that they're serious, they're a professional, and that they're keeping up with their schedule. And then I also take a look at their social media following. I want to know that they've got an audience, and that's one of the best ways to judge if they have an audience, because we don't generally have access to their download rates and that sort of thing. Sometimes you can tell by the number of reviews they have on iTunes, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of research that goes into us finding podcasts for our clients. And in the past, that's been something that you could only get from us if you were a retainer client with us and you were working with us on a variety of other things like guest blogs and TV appearances and all that kind of stuff as well. But we are rolling out a new product. I haven't even talked about it anywhere but here, and I wasn't honestly even thinking about talking about it here today, but it fits in so well with what I'm talking about that I want to share it. We are going to have a new product that's going to be a flat fee where we will pitch you for a certain number of podcasts. I'm still working out exactly the details. I'm really close, whether we would pitch you. What I'm looking at right now is pitching you for 20 podcasts that would fit your particular business and your unique attributes and the ideal clients you're looking for. And so we would go find the podcast and we would actually do the pitching for you for those podcasts. So you would pay a flat fee for us to go out and pitch you for those podcasts. Anyway, I digress. So if you're going to pitch yourself for the podcast, it is important to spend that time going out there and looking for podcasts that are going to reach your ideal audience, that are consistent. They've got a little bit of a following. It's not difficult to do. It can just be time consuming to do, but that's the kind of legwork you're going to need to do first. And then you're going to be working on your actual pitch. So the email that you're going to send them to tell them, hey, I want to be on your podcast. And this is where things kind of go awry. Like I said, I have a client who we read through all the submissions she gets for her podcast, and they range from like phenomenal and we say yes on the spot to I don't make it through 2 paragraphs and I've already closed the email and moved to the next one, because she gets so many and she's getting requests for all sorts of other things all in this same inbox, to be on people's summits and for her to be a guest on people's podcasts. And she gets so many requests that, one, that's why she hired us, is to go through all that for her. But it also means that if you can't capture our attention right away, we're moving on. And you can imagine that most podcasts get a lot of requests like that. So the way that we structure our podcast pitches is that we start out by showing them that we understand the type of guest they're looking for. That tells them I'm not just using a template. Now, at the end of the day, I do have a sort of base template I'm using, and sometimes I have several. Usually I have several. So, for example, I have one client right now, and we're pitching her for kind of, I'd say, 3 different types of podcasts. So we have a pitch that's more for inspirational podcasts. We have a pitch that's more about parenting and how that fits with her entrepreneurial lifestyle. And then we have a pitch that's more substantive about what she actually teaches clients to do. So we don't have just one template. We usually have quite a few depending on the podcast that we're pitching. But the way I structure all of them is that I start out by sort of introducing myself and saying who my client is and that we're a fan of the podcast. And I say, we know you like guests who... So in my template, that's blank. And we actually do the work to find out what kind of guests they like. Sometimes they say it right on their website. They'll say, we have guests who cover X, Y, and Z. Or they might even have on their contact page information about how to get in touch if you want to be on the podcast. And it might give you more information about exactly what they're looking for. But even if it doesn't come right out and tell you, if you just look at the description of the podcast and you scroll through some of the past guests that they've had, again, legwork. It takes some time if you're going to do this for yourself, but you can figure out the types of guests that they like to have. And so I put that right in that first paragraph because that shows them I did my homework. That shows them I didn't just write one pitch and like BCC it to 45 podcast hosts. I mean, when we landed 50 podcasts in 60 days for that one client, every single one of those was individually sent. That was not like a giant email blast that I did, and it wasn't even all on the same topic. If I went back and looked, I bet we had 10 different topics. It may have even been more like 12 or 15 different topics we pitched across all those podcasts. It was a massive amount of work. She actually used her entire retainer for a month on nothing but having us pitch her for those podcasts because that was her focus. Her goal was to be on 30 podcasts in 30 days, and we ended up doing 50 podcasts in 60 days. But it's not coming up with a form template and then BCCing it out to 60 podcast hosts at once. Please, I beg of you, don't do it. It's faster. It is not more effective, okay? It's not going to land you the interviews that you want. And if you make that bad first impression, if you try to go back and do it right later, there's the chance that they won't give you another opportunity, that they'll see your name and be like, God, I remember this woman, and they won't even open that second email. So take the time and do it right the first time. And if you don't have time to do all this legwork and all this research on your own, find someone like us who can do it for you. Esther Kiss, who I mentioned earlier, I talked to her the other day. She has a podcast only package that's based on her only pitching you for podcasts. There are people out there who can assist you with this kind of stuff. And I don't want to tell you like that this is a big sales message for us and that you have to hire us to do it. There's other people who can do it, but please do it the right way. Either spend the time and do the research and the legwork on your own, or hire someone who will do it for you, because that is going to greatly increase your success rate. Okay, so I start out with that opening paragraph where, I identify the types of guests they're looking for. That tells them my pitch is worth reading because I really know what they're looking for. I did my homework. They're going to give me another paragraph. So then in the next paragraph, I usually go into some sort of like surprising or shocking question or fact about my topic to sort of grab their interest. And if you've heard me talk about the way that I pitch before, I do that for pretty much everything I pitch, public speaking, TV. That's sort of part of my formula, is that's how I like to grab people's attention. And then I'll go into a little detail on the topic and sort of flesh it out. It depends on what we're pitching as to how we weave in the biographical details of our client to show that they are the person you want to have on to speak about this topic. But one thing I think is really important to do, and the way I think you should focus your pitch, and this works for everything unless you're doing a podcast that's purely inspirational and it's just about sharing your journey. Outside of that, most podcasts want you to come on and they want you to teach their audience something. They want their audience to walk away with actionable advice, actionable tips, whatever you want to call it. And I use that language in my podcast pitch. I will frame up the topic and then I will say, the audience will walk away knowing, and I'll give like 3 or 4 bullet points. I think a great way to structure it, if you're not sure how to pitch it, is to choose your topic and then think about 3 things. It's just an easy way. 3 is a great number. Think of 3 things you can teach people how to do or explain to them that they can walk away from the podcast and implement at some level. Okay, you're not giving away all your secrets because ultimately you're trying to sell a service or a product by being on this podcast, but you want to prove to the host that you're going to come on and provide value. Okay, that's what's important to them. They want to get people listening to their show and people talking about how great their show is. And the way they're going to do that is by having awesome guests who provide a ton of value to their audience. So if you want to be on the show, you need to sell the host on the fact that you are going to bring value to the show. And the way you prove that is you show them what you're going to teach your audience. What are they going to walk away knowing how to do? And I had an example for you guys. Let me see if this silly iPad has gotten its act together here now. I had a pitch all pulled up on my phone that I was going to share with you all so that I could show, I'm literally going to read it to you so that you can hear how I lay this out in a pitch. And here we go. It seems like now, of course, that now that I'm already live, now my iPad's going to work. Doesn't that figure? But I wanted to give you an example because I know when you're starting out, sometimes it's tough because you've just never seen something like this. And so you don't know what it's supposed to look like or what it's supposed to sound like. So this is a pitch I sent for my client, Emily. She has a program now that's a virtual assistant academy teaching people how to start their VA business. And so this was actually a TV pitch that we did, but I would pitch it the same way for a podcast, and I probably will reuse it and pitch it for a podcast. So I talked about, I said I always start with like a shocking or surprising, fact or question or whatever to like pull people into the topic. So because we were doing TV, I wanted to show them I knew their audience and that I know that a lot of their audience is stay-at-home moms. So I talked about how a lot of people in their audience are stay-at-home moms, but who are probably interested in making some money on the side, and that Emily was one of those moms. And then I talk a little bit about how she started her business as a virtual assistant and how successful she is now to sort of credential her. And then this is how I frame up my topic, okay? I say, Emily would love to join you for a segment with advice for moms on how to start a business as a VA, including actionable advice on, and these are all bullet points, how to know if the time is right for you, the skills and experience you need, hint, it's less than you might think, which software and apps you need to get started, the first few things you need to do to ramp up, and how to land your first client. Okay. And then you want to close by making the ask. Okay. You want sort of a call to action. So I say at the end, please let me know if you're interested in this type of segment and when we can schedule a time for her to join you. Okay. You want to do the same thing in a podcast. Okay. At the end, you want to make the ask. You want to say, let me know when we can schedule a time for me to be on your podcast. It might sound a little presumptuous or ballsy or whatever you want to call it, but it's funny how much it improves your success rate and how many more yeses and how many more scheduling links find their way to your inbox when you just make the ask, okay? So that's sort of it. I mean, that's the secret to pitching yourself for podcasts, is to find the right podcast first and foremost, and to pitch yourself in a way where you're making it obvious to the host that you are going to teach their audience something they want to know, and that they are going to walk away with actionable tips they can walk away and implement today. Again, you're not giving away all your secrets. It's just like I'm doing here. I'm teaching you how to do something. But that doesn't, and you can actually go and implement this on your own. Can you implement it at the same level I can implement it for you? Probably not. Is your time better spent working on your business? Probably. But I also know that you're not all at a level where you can afford to hire someone like me. And so you can do it yourself, and you can be successful, and you can get yeses, and you can be on dozens of podcasts this year if you get out there and start now. I was my own publicist first before I was anyone else's. So I know that you can do it on your own, and I want to give you the tools to do that. That's what you're going to go on a podcast podcast and do, okay? You're going to teach someone how to do something. You're going to give them some actionable tips and advice that they can go implement. But if they're your ideal client, they're someone who needs more or who wants to delegate. And so they're now going to know, like, and trust you because you've taught them how to do something. You've demonstrated your expertise. And so now maybe they come by your service or your program. And this works for products too. I have a couple of product-based clients that go on podcasts as well and talk about, like, I have a client who has a vegan skincare line, and she could go on a podcast and talk about why she created the skincare line and how she formulated it and the difference between, skincare lines that say they're organic or natural versus something that's 100% plant-based and what those distinctions are. So she can still go on and teach people something that hopefully leads them to want to buy her product. So that's all I have for you on how to start pitching yourself for podcasts. I would love to answer any questions that you guys have, so feel free to post those below. I know I saw several of you on here and you were leaving me little thumbs up and hearts. I love that. That's so much fun. So I appreciate you joining me today. And of course, I've got a Facebook message that's like popping up on my screen while I try to do this. You know how that goes. So I appreciate you joining me. If you watch the replay and you want to ask questions, I will come back and answer them in the comments. So by all means, feel free to leave questions in the comments and I will come back and grab them later. I hope you guys have an awesome day. Thanks.